Hey, how's it going? The Sleepy here. I was getting tired of the storyline and whatnot. I don't, as much as playing the Evil Corporation is fun, I think Kraken Incorporated should be a little bit nicer, and I think that I wasn't having much fun with the earlier storyline. So I'm just gonna start a new game here, and we're gonna see what happens. I'm thinking about building some sort of space station. So that's probably what I'm going to do next. What should we name it? We should name it, how about Project Horizon? That sounds cool. Career mode still can't work, which is sad. Maybe in the next update or 3, they'll get career mode working, which would be kind of fun. It's my Kraken Incorporated banner, which I'm probably going to use for my missions, but I want to use the default flag for the whole game. Maybe not that one though. Nah, I like the Kerbin flag. Kerbin is acceptable. Oh, I'm gonna have to import all my ships. Oh well. We'll get around to it. So the first thing is we are going to build a basic space station. I want to put it in about 250-kilometer high orbit. That sounds pretty good to me. 250 kilometers is pretty good actually, because at 250 kilometers it's far enough above regular low Kerbin orbit that all the crap that winds up getting left in low Kerbin orbit won't affect it. And I won't wind up with this thing getting hit by something. And it's high enough up that in order to actually dock with it or perform an intercept with it, you're going to need to have some skills, so I won't wind up with the other players who are some classmates that I'm going to get playing Kerbal Space Program with me as other corporations. I think one of them is going to be Spartan Incorporated. That'll be fun. But 250 kilometers is high enough up that they won't accidentally hit it or try to dock with it with anything less than a higher quality ship, because they do kind of have a tendency of just hurling things into orbit and seeing what happens, which, I mean, everybody does. Kerbal Space Program has a massively steep learning curve. And because of that, a lot of people have a hard time getting into it. I had a wonderful time with the learning curve, actually. I quite enjoyed getting my first satellite into orbit. But because of the steep learning curve, new players will often wind up making a total mess of everything, and they don't play as much as I do. I'll see how the story winds up going. That'll be a lot of fun. But I don't expect them to be doing any feats of Kerbal engineering that put me to shame, although I really hope they do. It would be cool to have some surprises in these videos, or get attacked by a fleet of ships that I never saw coming. That sort of thing would just be fun. We're going to do the game itself by exchanging the file on Dropbox, so that I can drop in the saved file, they can put their images in, and we can all have the same mods running at the same time. And we'll see how that goes. And I'll make videos about it. So that's my plan, and the station's shaping up pretty well. We're going to try and get this little bugger into orbit. One thing that I noticed when trying to get things into orbit is, with a wider base, that sort of square shape that I frequently use, it's a whole lot easier to get something into orbit than it is with a sort of long, skinny rocket. And a lot of people do like long, skinny boosters upon boosters upon boosters with some mainsails underneath or something, or some mainsails halfway up. And I don't. It just seems incredibly unstable compared to what these later designs are like. I suppose part of that is because the station and other ships that I build are sort of large at the top, so if you don't connect stuff directly under it and instead connect stuff to the sides and behind it, it's a lot easier on the vessel. And the other reason is because I like getting things into orbit with full fuel, so that really limits me in my design, because if you're going to get something into orbit with full fuel, that means you need to lift all the fuel on board, lift the fuel to lift all the fuel on board, and actually have enough power to make it go. So that means multiple engines. So you can't have just a single mainsail under your ship and then finish it off into orbit with fuel if you want to get into orbit with full fuel. What you need to do is you'll need to have like 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 engines, maybe 8 engines, pushing it up all the way into orbit so that you have enough thrust to have a very small burn time for your apoapsis once you reach orbit. So anyway, back to the story. The moon incident was several years ago and turned out inconclusively because I never finished the third video. Maybe we'll do a retrospective on the moon incident. But Kraken Incorporated is now contracting peacefully with the Kerbal Space Center, and we have a new CEO who's promised not to be a complete bastard, and is part of this promise funding Unity 1, an orbital space station that I'm currently putting up. It's spinning a little bit. Yeah, alright, we're okay. So, Unity 1 is going to be this space station for refueling. You can see that huge sphere of fuel that I put on it. And speaking of getting things up in one piece that don't need to be refueled, I'm going to try and get all of that fuel. That's like 3 orange tanks right there. I love the spherical fuel mods. You can put so much fuel in them, but they're so heavy. So I'm going to try and get all 3 of those orange tanks worth of fuel in that big sphere up into orbit and actually be able to use it as a refueling location. Now, even though we do have a nicer CEO, we're still going to arm the station for self-defense purposes, but we're not actually going to go out and actively seek out enemy vessels and whatnot or anything like that. I assume that we're going to have plenty of trouble dealing with debris in low Kerbin orbit anyway. Is it? No, it's alright. It's alright. Right, Jeb? It's alright. So it's a little bit teetery. I mean, I put a whole bunch of struts on it, so it should be okay, but it feels like it might be a little bit teetery. I don't know. The thrust vectoring gets weird sometimes when you have so many of them. So, oh, no, wait, that's bad. Oh, that's bad. Oh, damn it. There goes, oh gosh. Okay, no. Okay, now the fuel flew off. All I have is these little bitty rockets. So you can do it, Jeb, right? You can burn through all of that fuel to reduce the weight to something those rockets can lift before you hit the ground. Oh man, what a mess. So our simulation launch went very poorly, and we have to redesign the vessel because it is absolutely not Kraken Incorporated's way to just send people up in experimental vessels that have never been simulated or tested without sufficient struts. So Bill Kerman's in command here of our new Unity Science Station put up by Kraken Incorporated. We have Neilfred Kerman, Kordoff Kerman, Jennabel Kerman, and Malbal Kerman as our crew members. We have this ridiculous launch vehicle, but I think it's going to work. It's mostly been tested, and Bill is a pretty good pilot, so he can probably hold it together. And we're going to throttle this thing up to 2/3 and go. We're going to try and maintain enough fuel so that these can burn all the way out before we have to drop them. Oh, this is a resounding tragedy. So after many more attempts of attempting to get my vessel into orbit, it turned out being just a matter of more struts. You can see more struts there in between the orange tanks. I finally did manage to get it into orbit, and I put it into a very nice, very round 250 kilometer orbit. There's I wound up having to use the tiny rocket engines on a large fuel tank, but that's okay. That's why they're there. I won't have completely full fuel, but I'll be able to send something up to refuel it when I send something up. And I should have plenty of fuel to actually cover all of my needs for a very, very long time. So, once I finally get it up, here we go. Once I finally get it up, we are going to have our station in orbit, and it can act as a supply depot, it can act as a crew supplies location, it can act as a huge number of things in order to get us further out into space. I'm going to add a solar array here and a solar array there. I'm going to add some more modules and supplies here and here. And then back here is where I'm going to put the docking port the fighter bay, the point defense system.
I didn't burn through all my fuel, but I tend to use RCS for the final orbital changes when I'm dealing with extreme sensitivity, which I'm doing right here because I want, a perfectly circular orbit at 250 kilometers or really close to it. So RCS is sort of what you use for that when you get the opportunity. A lot of times I'll just burn close to my intended orbit and then use RCS to finish it. Here you can see I have a delta altitude of about 300 meters, which is really good. So it's like 250,000 and 300 meters on one side and 250,000 meters on the other side. So that's my orbit. That's our final orbit for this station. It's a mid-Corbin orbit, I guess. It's not exactly a high orbit, but it's above low orbit. And at 250 kilometers, you can also warp at 1,000 times, which is nice. So I'm going to end it here, and then I'll do another video for the second half, which is where I go and put the solar arrays on the space station. So this is sort of a video in two halves. I'm not sure how long the other one's going to end up being, but we'll see. So I'm just going to end this one here and then start the next one.